Well, the phone call really did not yield very much. I mean, Donald Trump had taken up President Zelensky's proposal, which was for a full ceasefire on the air, on the ground, and on the sea. President Putin had rejected that before the phone call, and he reiterated his rejection, but in a very clever way by saying, "Well, I agreed to a ceasefire on energy infrastructure, and to work on a ceasefire on the Black Sea." Now, of course, that's important for Putin because Russia's energy infrastructures are being bombed by Ukraine, and this is affecting Russia's ability to bring fuel to the army. And the Russia has also suffered a lot in the Black Sea, where its ships have been also attacked by Russia. By Ukraine. So, but apart from that, there was an extraordinary proposal to create a task force to talk about a potential ceasefire and peace process. Well, this task force already exists, so that also feels like a desire to try and fill the gaps of the fact that there are not many results. One positive thing was the exchange of prisoners, 175 prisoners on each side. And Putin said he would show his goodwill by sending 23 severely wounded soldiers to Ukrainian soldiers back to Russia. But it's also important to understand in this context that Putin is presenting this as a humanitarian gesture. This is days after he has said that the soldiers that he's captured in the Kursk region will be considered to be terrorists, and that means they will not be protected under international conventions which protect prisoners of war. So all in all, and the most important thing, Putin said, yes, we will only be able to discuss a peace if Ukraine is completely disarmed, no more military assistance to Ukraine, including intelligence assistance. And to add insult to injury, he's saying that he will do this if no Western partners give aid to Ukraine, as if he was speaking to Donald Trump, as if Donald Trump were the sort of the head of a Warsaw Pact type organization that could tell Western allies what to do. So he shows his disdain for the rest of Europe and the West.
And of course, Samantha, Europe has reacted to the phone call and what has happened since Germany has accused President Putin of playing a game. What do you think the president of Russia is thinking right now?
Well, I think the president of Russia is looking at gaining through Ukraine's complete capitulation. He's also been very clear that he will only entertain bilateral talks between Russia and the United States, as if the rest of the West did not have any weight or any importance whatsoever. And of course, Ukraine did not have any importance whatsoever. So again, we're seeing this desire by Putin to separate the US from the rest of the West and to create a complete division within NATO, within the Western alliance, which will, of course, make us all a lot weaker, which is what his end game is.
The key to this, presumably, though, is we genuinely don't know what President Trump is thinking about all this. And all we can do is fill the vacuum with speculation about what he might be thinking and what he might be doing in terms of his relationship with Russia and his relationship or no relationship going forward with Europe. And we just don't know, do we, at this stage?
We don't know, but we do have some clues. Donald Trump has been very clear that he's interested in business opportunities in Russia. When the first meeting took place in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago, a member of the Russian team was someone called Kirill Dmitriev, who's the head of the Russian Investment Fund. And even before the meeting started, he talked about all the wonderful business opportunities that will be accessible to American businesses once relationships are normalized between the US and Russia. So Donald Trump is interested in what he will get, in what kind of business deals he will be able to get once this very irritating issue for him of war in Ukraine is solved. Marco Rubio, the state secretary, said something quite interesting during his stopover in Shannon Airport last week after his meetings in Jeddah. He said one of the issues that will be on the table will be European sanctions on Russia, and how this will play into the future negotiations. The way I read that is that there's going to be pressure on Europe and the UK to lift certain sanctions on Russia, because again, Putin doesn't like this. This could be what Putin is trying to get Trump to agree to. And Trump is interested in this idea because it opens up all sorts of wonderful business opportunities for him and those who surround him.
But given
In
what
a
we've
con-
seen from Europe thus far, since President Trump came to power and started these talks of trying to end the war and negotiations with Russia, Europe is just simply not going to do that, are they? They're not going to go, okay, the president of America is telling us to stop penalising Russia economically. Okay, we're going to do that. They're not going to do that from what we've seen, how they've responded so far.
well, that's what they have responded up to a point. Last week, the European Union had to renew a package of sanctions on Russia. Hungary refused to vote for that renewal unless a certain amount of individual Russians were removed from the sanctions list. So there is a lot of pressure within Europe. Europe is not able to really act with a united voice because of the presence of some European Union members who are much more Russia friendly. So when we talk about the West putting pressure on Russia here, we're really talking about a collection of countries, and I'll include the UK there, which is very, very involved in the whole European process of figuring out the best way to stand up to Putin. So I think we're going to see I don't see Europe lifting sanctions from Russia. I don't see the UK lifting sanctions from Russia. And again, what we're going to have here is a further split in the Western alliance.
Which
And
is
and the
arguably what some people would say President Putin wants. In terms of
is
President Putin, he surely hasn't got the resources, the soldiers for a war to go on indefinitely, especially if we believe the invasion was meant to be a short, sharp shock and that side of it failed for him.
I think it's a real mistake to underestimate Russia's potential here. First of all, Putin has put the whole Russian economy on a war footing. He's now spending 40% of the Russian budget on the military. That is enormous. He is increasing military production like no other country in the world right now, except perhaps North Korea. He's also managing to get volunteers to sign up to very lucrative contracts in the army. Where Russia has a problem right now is manpower in civilian life, in factories, in offices, in the real non-military related economy. But because he's offering so much money to people who sign up, people are actually going for it. So right now, I don't see a very significant shortfall for the Russian army. Plus, he has allies who are willing to produce manpower, like North Korea, which gave about 12,000 men at the end of last year to Russia. A lot of these have actually been killed, but North Korea has said on a number of occasions that it would be willing to provide more if necessary. So I don't think that is really going to be Russia's problem. You have to remember that Putin is not the head of a democracy. He will do whatever he wants to do, and his population will have to swallow it, whether they like it or not.
I have heard these times that we are living through as post-pandemic pre-war. Would you go along with that assessment?
Unfortunately, yes. Pre-war does not mean that it has to be war. Pre-war means that we're in a situation which could very easily get out of hand. And unfortunately, experience shows that if you show Russia you are weak, Russia then takes advantage of that weakness. For the last 30 years, the West, and by the West, I mean the UK, EU, NATO, have been trying to accommodate Russia, have been trying to incorporate Russia into a whole load of Western institutions. You have something called the NATO-Russia Council. You had increased relations between Russia and the European Union through something called the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement. You had a lot of bilateral ties, bringing Russian businesses into London, which some people joke about London and call it London grad. All that aim of integrating Russia and showing Russia that we are all in this together. The response that has been from Russia has been systematically more and more aggression towards its neighbors, sabotage in European countries, the use of radiological and chemical weapons on British soil. I mean, we have to remember this is a hostile actor. As long as we show that we are strong, we will be safe. as long as if we show we are weak, Russia will take this as a way to continue to weaken our societies, weaken our democracies. And that does not mean a full-blown military attack on a European or a NATO member state. It means continual sabotage, putting fire, setting fire to warehouses in London, putting explosives on DHL planes in Lithuania, cutting internet cables in the Baltic Sea. And this is just the beginning of a list, not to mention trying to conduct assassination attempts against opponents on British and European soil. So as long as the UK and Europe show that they are strong, that they will not abandon Ukraine, that is the best way to stop any kind of more intense war, whether it is hybrid or actually physically military confrontation, at bay.
Given all you've just said, and given the context, and given the years and decades we've been living through, talk of talks in Saudi Arabia, are they a red herring? Are we not? Should we not be looking at those with optimism and hope right now?
Well, I mean, one isn't going to be, deliberately pessimistic. Maybe one of the outcomes of the talks in Saudi Arabia is that the American negotiators might realize to what extent Putin is negotiating in bad faith. So far, Trump came to power saying he would resolve this in 24 hours. This has not been resolved. If the American side genuinely wants peace in Ukraine, a peace that is not done at Ukraine's expense or at the expense of Europe's security, they might realize how difficult a task this is and might actually start being tough with Putin. If, on the other hand, the American side is intent on getting a deal that is only in Trump's interest, and I say Trump, not even the United States' interest, but in Trump's interest and in the interests of the business partners who are hoping to get quick access to Ukraine and to Russia, then I am pessimistic. What one keeps on hoping there's going to be a wake-up call in Washington, that they're actually going to surround themselves with people who understand what Putin wants. Putin wants the absolute complete weakening of the Western alliance, and that includes the United States. President Trump does not seem to be able to get that on board. He has a very personalized view of his relationship with Putin, and he sees it through the prism of a businessman and his business interests, not national security. And that is the problem that we have. The second thing about these negotiations, Ukraine is not at the table. This is about Ukraine. And Europe is not at the table. And by Europe, I mean the EU plus the UK. They're not at the table, where our security interests are directly affected by what happens in Ukraine. So I'm not very optimistic about these talks, but I will try to keep an open mind, because otherwise, we all just give up at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The world watches and waits to see what President Trump and Washington does next. Samantha de Bendern, thank you very much for your thoughts on this really pressing issue. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.